Welcome to our Enterprise Blockchain, the Path to Monetization workshop. My name is Guido Molinari, and I'm the managing partner at Prism Group. In today's workshop, we are going to be discussing with a number of industry leaders that are going to be joining us over the next 3 hours. I'm going to be kicking things off with a brief introduction about us, Prism Group, and presenting a couple of frameworks that we can use when thinking about some of the insights that the various speakers are going to be sharing with us this afternoon. And then I'm going to be leading the first set of fireside chats, where we're going to have joining us Mariana Gomez de la Villa from ING Bank, Demetrio Migliorati from Banca Mediolanum, Olaf Ransom from Finality International, and Riccardo Turbiani from Microsoft. After that, I'm going to be giving the floor to my colleague Rick Cataldo, who is going to be hosting a session with speakers joining us from Ireland and the US Coast. We're going to be having with us Jaron McGowan from WeTrade, Shyam Nagarajan from IBM, Chen Zhe from Ernst & Young, and Daniel Wilson from TradeLens, and Mark Treshock from IBM Pharmaceutical Utility Network. After that, I'm going to be coming back, and with me, there's going to be another set of speakers joining us from the US Midwest and the Rockies. Among them, there's going to be Adam Kaplan from Salesforce, Meyrick Vaz from UnitedHealthcare, the Synaptic Health Alliance, and David Post from IBM, Trust Your Supplier. We're going to then take some key takeaways together with Kathy Barrera, our founding economist at Prism Group, and we're going to draw some conclusions together from today's workshop. So our next speaker is Meyrick Vaz. Meyrick is the Vice President of Strategic Market Partnership at UnitedHealthcare. He leads all strategic market partnership for the Office of the CIO and is in charge of the blockchain initiative. For the international viewers that might not know UnitedHealthcare, it is the largest healthcare company in the world. They netted $243 billion in revenue in 2019, and they are a founding member of Synaptic Health Alliance, together with other major healthcare companies, Humana, Aetna, Multiplan, Optum, and Quest Diagnostic. And today, Meyrick is going to be talking about his leadership in the Synaptic Health Alliance. So, Meyrick, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Guido. Thanks for having me.
Really wonderful having you here. Synaptic, Health Alliance was formed around the initial use case, right, which is patient health directory, which, I was reading a recent interview from one of your colleagues, actually from Multiplan, and it was defined as a tedious exercise of updating the database and of physician directories that each healthcare provider has to do every year. And the estimated cost for the industry of this exercise of sort of calling practitioners was $2.1 billion a year. And I know you guys have, deployed the first successful test in Texas. So my first question, Meyrick, is, you guys chose this particular, use case to start, and you're looking to grow the network. Why was, patient directories the first use case that you guys came around, and what have you learned from that?
Sure. So we started the Alliance about 2 years ago, and the goal was always to build utility solutions that could benefit the entire industry. And that was the mission that kind of guided us as we started the Alliance. And while we were trying to select the use case that we would pursue first, we decided to keep it simple. We decided to go with a use case that everybody's challenged with, but also doesn't deal with competitive issues, private data, personal identification, PHI, PII, those kind of things, because we wanted to focus on testing how blockchain technology would work in healthcare, and also try to apply it for a use case that would allow us to test that. So provided directory maintenance, provided data exchange seemed to be the type of use case that we would want to tackle first. All of the Alliance members are trying to curate and maintain the quality of their provided directories. Everybody's dealing with the same challenge. this is publicly available data. And like you said, the industry is spending more than $2 billion per year trying to keep this up to date. So we figured this would be an ideal use case for us to start with.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned PHI, and of course related to the HIPAA, which is the big word that is often talked around when we think about healthcare data. Where how do you see this challenge going forward? Thinking about future use cases, where there might be the need to access personalized health information of individuals, and how do you see blockchain able to overcome this challenge?
So we definitely feel that at some point in the near future, we're going to look into taking on another use case that most likely is going to deal with these kind of issues. We've looked across the spectrum of healthcare operations. We think we could apply blockchain very effectively in provider credentialing, patient health records exchange, patient eligibility management, patient consent management. These are just some of the use cases that we've talked about. And all of them deal with personal data to some extent, whether it's data of the healthcare provider or data of the patient. We're just starting to put some initial thinking around which of these use cases we want to tackle next. We have some preliminary ideas, but they're still on the whiteboard stage right now. But we feel that based on our experience so far with blockchain technology in terms of managing security, privacy, performance, scalability, connectivity, data integration, etc., we feel like we might be ready to try out another use case fairly soon.
Exactly, sir. That's great to hear. And I was reading a little bit about the results of your pilot from some of your colleagues at Multiplan, and one particular number struck to me that they were saying that in the pre-blockchain provider directory calling, only 16% of the calls that their call center would make to the healthcare provider would result in a change in the directory. So 16 times out of 100 they were successful, and there was a positive ROI of making the call, and 84 times. And after implementing the pilot, this went up to 60%. So there was a 400% improvement, which is really incredibly promising, thinking about it. Again, the $2.1 billion that we mentioned that are spent every year. Is this the type of improvement that you think we will be able to see in other use cases? I mean, is this sort of a new benchmark that you guys have? Because this shows really a massive potential for this technology in terms of driving down costs for organizations.
I think the benchmark is going to be different for each use case, right? It depends on the use case. It depends on the extent of the challenge that the industry is facing with that particular use case. With the provider directory or the provider data exchange use case, we've seen some very, very early encouraging results. You mentioned the multi-plan example. One of the things that excites some of our payer alliance members is the fact that we can find up to 88% of data corrections that we need to make to our directories with respect to inactive locations and address corrections. Those two scenarios are huge for us. They're the sources of the most patient calls calling us to say, hey, we haven't been able to find a doctor. They are two major reasons for audit findings when CMS audits the quality of our data. So we're pretty excited about those results. We are currently testing another model where we are looking to share the results of the provider outreach calls that we make, and we're looking at sharing the results of those across Alliance members. That's a model we're currently testing, and we're seeing some really interesting early results that show that we don't all have to make potentially the same volume of outreach calls to these healthcare providers on an annual basis, because we can depend on other Alliance members to share the results of their calls, and that eliminates the call for us. Those are just two models two scenarios that we're kind of testing, and we're finding some really interesting results.
Mm-hmm. No, those are like incredibly promising early results from your pilot. Now, Meyrick, of course, you operate in the healthcare industry, and the COVID outbreak, I imagine, must have shifted a bit priorities within the organization or within other organizations that are member of Synaptic. What has been the impact so far of the outbreak? As things slow down? Has there been sort of a new set of priorities? And how do you see things going forward in the next few months?
So we're currently running this initiative as an innovation program in our organizations, and the major impact from the COVID-19 situation has been that some of our internal teams are distracted because it is of the highest priority for us to make sure that our healthcare providers can provide the care to the patients who are dealing with this illness. So for our particular program, we're trying to make sure we don't get in the way of any of our resources who are focused on other COVID-19 activities. As we conduct our pilots and our tests, one of the other things that we're trying to make sure is we ask ourselves this question every time. If I am executing step A, B, or C of this pilot, am I going to be distracting a healthcare provider? If I make a phone call to them, for example, am I going to be distracting a health system if I reach out to them for data, for example? So we're taking those things into consideration, making sure that we don't come in the way of the priorities that these health systems and healthcare providers are facing. And then we're very, very sensitive to making sure that we don't distract our internal teams who are also working on COVID-19 projects.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, I would imagine that many health professionals right now are very overburdened from the immediate response to outbreak, and so we need to be very conscious of their time and resources. So, Meyrick, looking at sort of the future and thinking about the long-term impact of blockchain for the healthcare industry. What do you see as the sort of most promising post, this outbreak response and sort of long-term for Synaptic as an Health Alliance, and also thinking about, I know that there are potentially new members joining. So how do you see this developing over the next few years?
So we feel really comfortable and confident right now with the progress that we've made on the provider data exchange use case, which is our first use case. We're looking at launching that into production before the end of this year with a handful of states, and then we'll get into a 50-state rollout that'll bleed into next year. We believe that as we roll out more and more states, there's going to be a higher level of interest from industry participants to say, hey, this alliance is doing some interesting stuff. I can find business value from joining them and taking advantage of their solution. So we believe that there's going to be some momentum building. And as you know, with a blockchain network, the more members you have contributing to the network and deriving business value from the network, it completely enhances the comprehensive value that network can bring to all its members. And then I mentioned a few examples of other use cases that we're whiteboarding right now. We haven't decided which one we're going to take on as our second use case, but at some point in the near future, we're going to say, hey, we're ready to start dipping our toes into a second use case. Most likely, we're going to take on a challenge that is of benefit to patients. So we're very interested in recruiting health systems to join the alliance because they are the ones who directly can help us test any use case that is of benefit to patients. And then we'll have that network effect growing from that use case as well. Blockchain technology is not the next best thing next to sliced bread, right? It's not going to solve all the problems. But we do believe that there are some use cases in healthcare where it can be applied and it can generate business value for our healthcare operations. And in the next 2 to 3 years, I think you're going to see more and more blockchain technology-based healthcare solutions out there.
Wonderful. Well, Meyrick, unfortunately our time is up for today, but I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward for to see more developments coming out of the Synaptic Health Alliance in the next few months.
Thanks for the opportunity, Guido, and good luck to everybody.